Emergency, there are fire exits on both sides of the room, the right to the left, and you can use those. And there's also some space at the large emergency exit next to the registration desk as well. Okay. So just also as a note, please keep checking your emails. We'll be sending some important updates during the day and when important things will come around. We shall be giving you more and more updates as on. So, okay, day number 4. I would want to start the day by talking about, a few years ago, we talked about the Cape to Cairo and all the other journeys. But I think that wasn't the last journey we're going to talk about in Africa. So today we must, let's hear about the Mombasa to Kinshasa and unlocking trade in a digitally connected continent. Please welcome to the stage a household name in the African peering and connection, Ben Robert, CTIO for Liquid Telecoms.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and it's good to be back. Let me just check everybody's awake, but how many people in the audience are from government, regulators, policymakers, anyone like that, anyone who's involved in policy making in government? Not so many today. Anyway, well, we used to have, I think, probably more people in policy making, particularly as a lot of internet exchanges are run by regulators as well. So it's surprising to have so few. But anyway, I think we all have a role in policy making, so I'll come to that as we go. Have you got the presentation ready? Wonderful. So this morning, I'm going to talk about Mombasa to Kinshasa and how we see that as being something that is unlocking trade in the continent of Africa when it's digitally connected. As Matthew said, about 5 years ago, 2018, I presented here a presentation called Cape to Cairo and Other African Journeys. So we're going to focus on this journey of Mombasa to Kinshasa. So this is Liquid Intelligent Technologies overview. We've been doing a lot of fiber and other things, but we've diversified now as a Pan-African technology business. We're doing different things, data centers, cloud, structured in such a way that we have different areas of technology business. We've raised about $3 billion in investing in infrastructure in Africa over the past 21 years. So I'm going to go back to just to recap. In 2018. First of all, recording in progress. We talked about some areas of the laws of physics and drilling down on how that affected latency, something we know in the network world. And ultimately, it drills down that latency is a formula based around about 2/3 the speed of light being the speed that the data signals go in a fiber optic cable. It's faster than that if they're in free space. But that is the only thing, that and distance are the only thing that can affect latency in networks. And I can say that since 2018, nothing has changed about the laws of physics. Picture there is Captain Scott, who reminded his captain all the time that the laws of physics don't change, and they still haven't changed. I also did talk about then early explorations into Africa of European explorers. And one of them particularly I focused on was Henry Morton Stanley, who he made various journeys into Africa, but this was his kind of final voyage where he crossed all the way from east to west, from Tanzania, actually from south of Mombasa to Lake Victoria, then to Lake Kivu before picking up the River Congo and then exiting on the Atlantic coast. He then went to London, wrote a book called Through the Dark Continent. And of course, after he wrote that book, lots of people had good ideas of expanding European borders into Africa and came and colonized and did other things. But they did build some certain infrastructures, railways and other trade corridors that were used at that time. And still these trade corridors are making up a lot of the fiber optic cable that we have and we use in the internet world. Now, I also talked about then, this is in 2018, it had just been signed, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was signed by most African countries. I think it's 51 out of 54. But at the moment, intra-African trade is very low. It's sort of low 10 to 15% of any trade that an African country is doing is trading with other African countries. The normal sort of average for other continents, Europe, North America, is that about 60 or 70% of any particular country's trade will be with countries in its own continent. So the Africa Free Trade Agreement, Continental Free Trade Agreement has potential to open up whole new markets, whole new areas of different trade. And I think really what we're doing here in building digital networks is not only enabling that sort of digital trade, being able to come to Ghana, hail an Uber, or be able to use e-commerce, buy your visas online, but it's also opening up normal traditional trade as well. So by having this infrastructure, by having connectivity that is enabling different African countries to communicate, to prepare their journeys, and to do normal types of trade of normal goods and services. But then we sort of took some challenges in 2018 of how the networks were configured. And so this journey, particularly that we're focusing on today, Mombasa to Kinshasa, according to the laws of physics and Google Maps, it should take 38 milliseconds of latency. But it was taking around, in 2018, it was taking around about, well, a lot more than that. The packets were going from up the east coast of Africa by subsea cable into France, into United Kingdom, and then coming all the way around Africa, which is a very, very long way, but to give a latency of around about 300 milliseconds. So about almost 8 or 10 times what it should be was how we were routing our internet packets in 2018. Since then, I think, we've had a lot of discussions in these things of areas of policy, but now African countries, we're talking of, in this digital world, we're talking not just of digital infrastructure, but we're talking of the digital economy. You can't really read those things, but there are 5 pillars on that diagram. It's very small, but the 5 pillars of the digital economy, which has been defined in a piece of work that Kenya did for Connect Africa. The 5 pillars are digital infrastructure, which is what we're doing here. We're building digital infrastructure, interconnecting digital infrastructure. Digital entrepreneurship, and that's the startups, the tech companies. Digital business, that's the transformation of normal businesses into digital businesses. The digital government, e-government services that are reasons that many people go online to do their government services. as well as digital skills and values. So have we got the skills that we need to use these digital services? All of that being underpinned by some sort of policies and overarching things that make all this happen. Now, at this stage, with the journey that we're in, I'm saying that this sort of picture of pillars in a building is too slow. Actually, we need to have 5 speedboats all moving in the same direction at great speed. We need to get it going faster. At Liquid, our job is to be building digital infrastructure. We're not in the taxi business. We're not hailing Ubers, but it makes a difference if a country where we're building network is having such digital services. If we're building fiber and the government has put its services online, then we benefit because that makes people go online. If people have the skills to go online and use the services and innovate, then that benefits us even more. So we're seeing it that for order for what we do to succeed, we need all of these pillars to succeed and to all go at a great speed of advancement. But at the moment, we're still seeing that in the world of tech startups, funding for tech startups, only 4 countries really are dominating the space in terms of the number of dollars being invested into tech startups, those being Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Egypt. Other countries are sort of coming in, some level behind: Ghana, Tunisia, Senegal, Morocco, Uganda, Tanzania, Algeria, Zambia, Cote d'Ivoire, Congo, and Rwanda, but 40 other African countries are having almost negligible funding towards tech startups. This is from data that's being reported, but it is I think quite telling as to where things are going. And as Liquid, where do you think we are going to invest? Right, we've invested very heavily in those 4 countries, or 3 of those countries already, but we're thinking about how to invest in infrastructure in those other countries that are emerging. Now, back to the journey. So we have actually finished building a whole fiber, so a direct route of fiber optic cable from Mombasa to Kampala, or to Nairobi, to Kampala, to Kigali, to Goma, and then to Kananga in DRC, and then all the way to Kinshasa. So we have a continuous fiber optic cable there. But not only that, we've actually built it with capabilities of extremely high speeds. That is because the needs of the types of customers that we have been building it for, what we would call hyperscalers or cloud operators, or people call them OTTs sometimes. Some of the customers we have requested very high bandwidth. When we used to build cross-border links before, we'd start, we're doing STM1 or something. Now we're building, multiple 100 gigabit links. These are very, very high speed networks. And from day one, there'll be very, very high speeds of data connecting across them. I did want to show a ping across this link, but it's not quite ready for that. But I have a ping from another link, which is going a slightly longer route all the way to Mombasa, to Lusaka, and to Kinshasa. That's about 61 milliseconds. But now when we do, and it's going to be days away, when we do start pinging across from Mombasa to Kinshasa, it'll be down to 40. So it used to be 299, it's now going to be 40 milliseconds. So an absolute step change in latency. And it will enable new things to happen. It will enable people to build their networks in different ways. People will be able to connect their cloud services with their edge services. Businesses will be able to do shared services from one location. In one data center, a bank or something will share its ICT services using such networks. So this is the route. It's kind of that big red line across the middle. This is what we call obviously a first mile link. It's a first link between 2 countries. But as we now have finished that, we're now planning extra routes on top of that, what we call the middle mile, connecting other towns, big towns where many people live, like Kalemi, Kindu in DRC. Millions of people live in some of these large cities, actually. So we're going to be building extensions onto that network to connect more people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So this hasn't been without challenges. We've been going on this fiber route. It's been a new experience, going into areas where roads didn't really exist. They hadn't been built. We've always built fiber on roads or railways or power lines before, but we've been venturing into areas where the road was never finished. Bridges collapsed. They've been there. We've actually had to restore about 21 bridges of our own, build civil bridges ourselves and make them up at our cost. Overall, the cost of building the fiber has been about 2 or 3 times more expensive than other fiber routes that we've built in Africa. So, we have had good partners on this project, and obviously, in fact, people that we have met through AfPIF, companies, large companies that we have originally first met at AfPIF have actually been working with us as partners and helping us finance this particular project. But we've also been looking at new technologies. Although that picture on the right is, it's in Nairobi, but we've there been looking at what we call free space optics technology, which enables you to have high-speed, fiber-like speeds running over free air. So using this in some of those difficult crossings to back up the fiber. So we can use we think the fiber is going to be more reliable, but in case of, if you go over a river and that fiber is cut, it may take you a long time to repair. So we use this free space optics technology to give you a backup in case of any particular problems. As well as that, right, we are now also working on strengthening some routes to different particular countries. Malawi is a good example, because Malawi has had connectivity for a long time. It's had 4 border crossings from 4 countries, going into 2 into Mozambique, 1 into Tanzania, 1 into Malawi, 1 into Zambia, sorry. Despite all this, we've seen that networks in Malawi, connectivity in Malawi has been very expensive. The cost of data has been very pricey. There's been a big campaign, price of data must fall in Malawi. As well as that's been very unreliable. I follow, there's a Twitter feed of Cisco BGP Mon, and then it gives you alerts when a particular network goes off the internet. And Malawi was the country in Africa where I would see the most alerts. So, what we've done here is we're sort of working to strengthen what we think is the best route, which is the one via Zambia. Best routes because it's giving the most direct connectivity back to South Africa, where we have content networks, cloud, CDNs, et cetera, but also having least possible for geographic, or natural disasters. The routes through Mozambique have been unreliable, been hit by 2 large cyclones, which have caused massive flooding over the past 3 or 4 years. So, we've been making our investments to strengthen that route to connect Lilongwe, the capital city, the administrative capital, to Malawi, to Zambia, and making that route as being the important one. Now, as well as what we're doing on the first mile and middle mile, we're still seeing a lot of new innovation on the last mile. That is the last mile that gives people high-speed connectivity to their homes. The latest and most famous of these last mile innovations is, of course, Starlink, which is coming to Africa and sweeping across. There are 4 or 5 countries there which are in the light blue that shows they have Starlink availability, but they're going through a process of applying for licenses in different countries. That is a process, and it does take time, and it's something we've worked on at Liquid, and it's taken us time. But they launched first in Nigeria, but recently launched in Kenya as well. So this is enabling very high speeds of internet in rural areas at prices that have not been achievable before with satellite. People do keep asking if we're worried we'll stop building fiber. We still see the need for fiber, obviously, and even to support these low Earth orbit satellites, we need to have fiber. And at the moment, the gateway for Starlink is based in Lagos. So all those other countries are backhauling their traffic over through space into Lagos before coming, before connecting to the internet. So if you're in Kenya, and you want to connect to your Kenyan tax website over a Starlink link, again, you'll have very high latency because it has to go to Lagos and come back. So that route that we've built, running almost below the equator, east to west in Africa, will be very important to enable these Earth stations of these low Earth orbit satellites to connect up together. So, you know, we're seeing more use for these east-west routes, but that's a particularly new application. And Starlink is the first to launch, but there are two or three other low Earth orbit constellations which are expected to come. OneWeb will definitely be launching in Africa very, very soon as well. And then Amazon and its Project Kuiper possibly will come in 2024. But not every technology in the last mile has succeeded. The picture on the right is at the Multimedia Museum in Nairobi, or the ICT Museum at the Multimedia University. And there, me and a couple of colleagues, we facilitated the donation of a Google Loon. This was a technology which was launched in Kenya, Mozambique, a few other countries, to address the challenge of the last mile. We were told that it would give cheaper data in rural areas, but that technology didn't work out. It wasn't economically viable. And that piece of technology, that loon has been put in the place in the museum where it shall remain for the rest of history, I think. But other innovations were spun off from that. And part of the research and R&D that was done for the loons is now being used in low Earth orbit technology, the satellites. So what we call, and even the free space optics. So this sort of, you know, research and development into solving the problem of the last mile is spinning off other solutions to work on the last mile, middle mile of technology. But anyway, let's come back to trade, which is what we wanted to talk about. You know, when we first started coming to AfPIF, countries were not connected to each other. We were talking as an industry together about the challenges, the policy challenges of making cross-border networks, of building them and then interconnecting them. We at Liquid, we kind of worked on doing this, and we started achieving cross-border links, Zimbabwe to South Africa, Zimbabwe to Zambia. But we kind of worked on what is the process. And we realized that we didn't need any policy interventions, actually, we just needed to follow the process. And when you travel to a foreign country, there's a process. You buy a ticket, you get a passport, you send your passport off to get a visa, you might need a vaccination certificate, you pack your things with you, you take money. And you know, this is what you need to do to travel to a foreign country. It's exactly the same with building a network. You have to get a license on either side of the border. You have to get, you know, the permissions to cross the particular areas. You have to get way leaves. So you tick off these particular pieces of process, and then you build a fiber. But once you've built the fiber, you then have you don't have to repeat the process. It's there forever. You've done the piece of construction, and data then just flows at 2/3 the speed of light over that fiber optic network. And you know, we don't need a passport or to pay taxes every time a piece of data crosses that border yet. So we need to think about certain things. I'm going to come into you know, a bit more detail on these, but data protection, taxation, addressing identity. I'll cover what those are about shortly. But we're starting to now see that you know, digital policy, which is what we're talking about as techies in our industry, it's actually starting to really become a big piece of foreign policy overall. So, you know, we're talking about policy, how to connect networks, and peering policies and all these things, but this is having an impact on the way we trade, right? And the way that we, as nations, are dealing with our neighbors. So a big development that happened last year was that DRC entered the East African community. And that became actually, as a new member, became the second largest economy in the East African community. Kenya first, and then DRC second. But DRC has the potential to be bigger than Kenya because of its population, because of its landmass, because of its minerals. But by joining this economic bloc, you know, now we have opening up of new trade possibilities. You know, another reason we've built this East-West network, you know, we're now having customers who are now Kenyan banks, for instance, Equity Bank, Kenya Commercial Bank, big customers of ours in Kenya, have been buying banks in DRC. Equity predicted in their annual results that they expect the profit and revenue from DRC to be bigger than their Kenya operation. So by enabling this digital causeway, enabling digital pathways, we're enabling banks and commerce and trade. But also Malawi recently, and there's a few other countries involved in this, but Malawi has been, I think with the current government there, are really looking at this, what they're calling diplomatic data corridors. So the regulator there and the government and even the president himself have been approaching this thing, you know, visiting other countries as a delegation to see how they can expand these digital corridors. And this is a government policy initiative, right? This is no longer stuff that techies are talking about in a hotel somewhere in Africa. This is something that presidents are talking about when they sit and have coffee with each other. So you know, it's getting somewhere, and there's movement happening. So back to the issues of trade. So there's a lot going on. The Africa Free Trade Concept for Trade has been signed. There was a first set of negotiations, and they're now in a second set of negotiations. And part of that negotiation set is around a digital protocol that will be laws and rules around digital trade. There was a conference in Kenya. This is more of a trade conference a few weeks ago. But there was a side event on this where people from the tech ecosystem in Kenya, along with other delegates, got together to talk about digital protocols and what the tech world would want to see. Came up with a few areas, and I'll explain why they're relevant. There is a paper as well on this, which I think maybe AfPIF can upload that paper with the presentation as well. But first of all was, you know, intersection with other protocols that are there. In every other area of the trade protocol, saying that things should be digital first. And that means cloud first, right? That means we're no longer having to have you know, servers in every country. We can use cloud technology, the interconnectivity in between. Recognizing of intellectual property, and also a balanced approach to allow use of open source. And also think about those investments, how we can distribute those those tech investments into some of the other countries. It's not just the 10 that we're talking about that I mentioned earlier. Digital identity is really important. So if I'm an e-commerce company and I'm in Kenya and I get an order from somebody in Uganda, you know, it's quite good to know who they are before I send them the goods. Find a way that I can trust them, you know, to know that they're going to pay or in advance or whatever it is. So harmonizing digital identity is a really big opportunity. African countries are investing heavily into digital IDs and ways that private sector businesses, people doing trade, can access that. It's going to be very important. Cross-border data transfers is absolutely critical. First of all, harmonization of data protection. Knowing that if you have a server in one country with some data on there and you open up an office in the next door country, you're knowing that you can use that same server. You don't have to go and buy another one. You know, you can use the data across the networks. Is really important for cross-border expansion of business. And then being able to use cloud, again, a cloud-first approach. Why not just stick it all in the cloud? We've got hyperscale cloud in Africa now, got a cloud in South Africa. We've got hyperscale cloud launching in Kenya very, very soon from AWS, they've announced. So this is the sort of things we're thinking about here. Most importantly, taxations and duties. Unfortunately, some governments are seeing the digital space as being a low-hanging fruit to tax more. We're seeing taxes and excise duty on data bundles, but we need to make sure that tax on data crossing borders doesn't become an issue, because that will break everything we're doing, right? If you have to measure your packets across a border or measure your digital assets and pay taxation on this, we're going to just, you know, we're pulling our hair out, become tax collectors rather than peering coordinators. But then emerging advanced technologies. things like artificial intelligence and distributed ledgers, blockchain technology, having a balanced approach to these type of policies to enable innovation in these spaces. Cross-border payment is very, very interesting, very, very important. Again, being able to pay for your goods and services across a border is very key, especially if you're selling digital services. If you are selling digital music and somebody can pay you from another country, you can send them their music straight away, stream it to them. But if they can't pay you, you cannot monetize your business. You cannot trade digitally. And then, another recommendation was around capacity building for digital trade across governments, across countries, at citizen level as well, working out how to cross-skill basic digital skills so that people can wider partake in the digital economy, more citizens taking part in this digital world that we are creating. And a great example of implementation of a number of these areas is a piece of work that was announced by AfXimbank. It was announced here in Ghana earlier the year on 21st of June. So AfXimbank is an export credit agency for Africa. Export credit agencies were created to enable countries to trade with each other. The reason that these export credit agencies were created in Europe largely after the Second and First World Wars. But generally, countries who trade with each other don't fight wars with each other. Most countries having export banks. AfRexim is the one which is here for Africa. So they've got 5 particular initiatives, which they call the Africa Trade Gateway, single window for digital services. And I'll go very briefly through them, but one is called MANSA. That's a due diligence platform that should enable you to check out a company, to check out who are you dealing with. Could be dealing with an individual, as I said, ID, but doing a DD on another business. Is this legitimate? Can I sell them those services? Big aspect in that to enable trust for doing digital business. PAPS was announced, I think, 2 years ago. This is very, very important. This is, I'd say, a wholesale level Pan-African digital payment system, enabling banks to send money directly to each other. If you send money from Kenya to DRC previously, then you would send it from your Kenyan bank. They would send it to somebody like Citi or Standard Bank in the UK or Citi in the US. Probably more likely to be in the US. It'd be converted into US dollars, or then come back to Africa and be sent not directly, but via a correspondent bank somewhere most likely in Europe or North America, or in London. No need to do that anymore with the PAPS. And then, we'll get a step further where we should be having actual direct currency trading between countries. I don't think Africa wants to do away with the dollar. They seem to love dollars. I think if the intra-African trade can be done without using the dollar as an intermediary currency, it will enable African trade. Tradar Club is a membership-driven networking, a bit like AfPIF, really, I suppose, but for business people rather than techies. ATEX is a B2B and B2G e-commerce platform to enable trading of agricultural produce across Africa and optimize the supply chains. And ATG Connect services is to ensure service providers across Africa can move things around that's focusing on their area of logistics and trade. So this is what AfReximbank is doing. And by doing what we're doing, we're enabling this, right? When we're talking of these cross-border links, we're enabling all this to happen. We're building the infrastructure to enable this to trade and countries to grow their economies. So you might be asking, I said there weren't many policymakers in the room. You might say, well, I'm just a peering engineer. What's my role in all this? He's talking big geopolitics. And I was just an engineer once, but I've met with 6 African presidents, talked about some of these things eventually, but I used to just configure networks. So what can you do? One, you can peer. We're here to start connecting our networks. You can start doing that and do it better. You can configure them properly so that better customer experience. You can route your packets nicely. You can use the data. A lot of projects we've heard about have been collecting data you can contribute data to do that, and you can use that data in your strategic planning. You can share your experiences with others, not just other techies, but other people within your business. In Liquid, we run a tech book club where we talk about tech policy. We get some blogs, some podcasts, and different people from all over the company join, and we discuss it. And it's very interactive. People from all sorts of professions, accountants, lawyers, they come and we talk about these areas of technology that's affecting changing the way we do things. And then what can be the outcomes of this, right? You might make new friends and business relationships by doing all this. You know, that's part of the reason that we've been a big sponsor of AfPIF, is coming here, making new partners that we're now doing very large business with. We might bring down the cost of data if we manage to configure our networks nicely. And by sharing the knowledge, you know, and making it work better, people will adopt the services better. You know, if the networks are working well, people will use digital services that will drive the demand, that will drive down the price. And this all has an impact on financing. As we're connecting more people, then the financing is largely coming from, or the cheaper financing is coming from development finance. They'll be putting more money into this. World Bank are very active in this space. But other countries, nations from China to USA to European Union to United Kingdom have all been very involved in financing the rollout of networks in Africa. So just as I conclude, I said open data. I'm just going to present 3 little open data projects that we've been involved in. One is an open schools data mapping. So we're working to connect schools in Liquid. And we've connected about 5,000 schools in Africa, but we think there's about 250,000 schools in the countries where we operate that are not connected. But we've been mapping this out. We're finding out from governments where are your schools. We're connecting, we're working out how far they are from fiber. And we're sharing this data with people like UNICEF at a global level, as a global partnership, to try and then encourage financing and funding into investment in the middle mile, our last mile, to connect schools, right? Another area we've been working on this on, we've worked with ITU. Other partners here in the room have been part of it. So C Squared is another partner, and ISOC themselves have been partners on this particular project, where we've been developing an open standard for fiber optic cable mapping, where it's actually now it's fully documented and it's on GitHub. So that is the list, but it's a standard of protocols and methods where you can document your fiber networks. And that means that we'll all be able to work out how to connect to each other. It's like a peering DB, but for infrastructure. So go and have a look at this, you know, see how you can contribute, how you can publish your networks where they are. Then we'll be able to connect to each other better, right? If we know where we are, we know where to meet, we can work it out at a national level and at a cross-border level. And then the last one of these, I just want to mention, it's not anything Liquid's been involved in this, but I wanted to showcase it because it's relatively new. This is an open content delivery network mapping. This has been created by Steve Song of Mozilla Foundation, Open Telecom Data Org, CDNs, and showing where the content delivery networks are in Africa. It's crowdsourced data. I don't know how much of it is collected from the CDN operators and how much they've done discovery, but it is showing where CDNs are in the continent. And just last observations on this, which I think are mostly positive. Every country has at least one CDN of the ones that's mapped. They've mapped Google, Akamai, Facebook, et cetera. They've got a few of them there. But every country I can see on the map has at least one CDN. There are also hub cities where they've got nearly all of them. So Johannesburg, Nairobi, Lagos, Cairo as being cities where nearly all of the CDNs have some presence. There's a mix of operator caches, so caches that are hosted within an MNO or an operator, and those that are hosted at internet exchanges. But the physical density is relatively sparse. If you look at Europe and you see the density of CDNs versus the density of CDNs in Africa, you'll see that, you know, they're dots rather than the clusters. Only a few countries have any of the caches in tier 2 cities. Mostly they're in just the capitals, but about 5 or 6 countries have got CDNs in their second city, third cities. So some diversity. And lastly, Google and Meta have the most caches. So yeah, I think Google were probably ahead, but Meta have definitely caught up in deploying the most caches. So anybody who's involved in caching or peering, look at this data and feel free to contribute to this project. And on that note, thank you very much. I'll end.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Anyone with questions? All right. All right. Ben is around all day. If you have any questions, comments, he's happy to take them. So moving on. The next speaker is someone who's very familiar or very active in the internet ecosystem, involved with the peering DB, even with the AfPIF PC, and also involved in the Euro IX. Let me welcome to the stage Yolandi. Take it away.
Cool. Well, good morning, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Yolandi from NAP Africa. And today we will be talking about how far behind are we really? So when we talk about Africa, usually we think that, our continent is way behind when it comes to technology. And we don't really have a measurement. What does that actually mean? How far behind are we really in terms of internet growth? All right, so looking at subsea cables, so this is going to focus around Africa, of course. Does anyone perhaps have an idea of when the first subsea cable was completed? Any idea? So the first subsea cable was completed on the 27th of July, 1866. So some of you might have been in your youth years when this was finished. So the first cable was from Valentia Island to Newfoundland. And as mentioned, this was in 1866. In 1975, the first fiber optic cable started making waves, right? So then we started changing the technology that we are using. And it's quite interesting to think that it took such a long time, from 1866 to 1975 to change that. Currently, we have around 1.4 million kilometers of subsea cables with 552 active and planned cables coming. That is a ridiculous amount of cables in our oceans, right? It's actually enough to go from Earth to the moon, go around the moon twice, and then come back. That's how much cable. So we can actually use the subsea cable to connect the moon if we really wanted to. So looking at where we are, so in 2010, there was around 30 cables in service. So this is 13 years ago. Currently, this was in 2022, there was 60. So this doubled within that time. So in a decade's time, the amount of subsea cables doubled. That means there is a demand, right? There is growth coming. And there's there will be at least 71 cables by 2025. Now that's actually a lot, because if you think about it, in 13 years, it was a growth of 30. And now looking from 2023 to 2025, that's 2 years, and already we are seeing 11 being installed and completed. Now that's just showing the growth rate that we are seeing, especially in Africa. Total used international capacity in the year of 2021 is 37.8 terabits of traffic. This includes internet, so your public IP backbone, content provider capacity, and also your private networks. Now, if we have a look at the regions, so obviously we're looking at Africa. So here you can see the amount of traffic that was going through Africa. So in 2017, we had 7.2 terabits of traffic within the country being exchanged. And from 2017 to 2021, we saw a 30 terabit growth. That is enormous amounts of traffic that is going through our country. And we are anticipating to see this grow as you know, most of the big providers and networks are now investing in Africa. So we are bringing the traffic local. So again, just looking at subsea cables. So as we know, to Africa is actually the longest cable that is connecting 33 countries and 3 continents. So the To Africa cable is going to be around 45,000 kilometers. So of course, making it the longest. Our shortest subsea cable that we have is 131 kilometers, and this is between Ireland and the United Kingdom. That is to Africa, 100 gigabits minus 20%. So what does this mean? So prices continue to decrease, right? As we get more cables landing, the competition is getting real, right? So now carriers and subsea cables providers need to look at their pricing and adjust to the market, because now we have more variety, we have more choice as to who we want to use. So what we've seen is for the 100 gigabit wavelength prices decreased an average of 12% between 2018 and 2021. And that is compared to 20% over the past 5 years. So the prices are decreasing. It's not as fast as we wanted to, but it is getting there, which is great for us. It means that there's more interconnectivity opportunities for us within the country. Looking at the Digital Quality of Life Index, this study on the quality of digital well-being across 117 countries, which is 92% of the global population, found that South Africa's internet quality remains the best in Africa. So we have something going for us. So looking at penetration, so internet penetration, there's a penetration rate of 51% of the total population in the country. Nigeria is one of the leading countries with the highest number of internet users. So Nigeria is really seeing an increase of, their population being on the internet and actively participating in what is going on in the world out there. Egypt ranks second in the number of internet users. So that is quite interesting to see that Egypt is number 2. And the penetration rate of countries like South Africa, Kenya, and Tanzania is more than 30%. So we are a little behind there, but it is growing. Now, looking at ASN numbers, this was quite interesting. So looking for the past 10 years, what has been happening in terms of network growth, in terms of peering in Africa. So if we have a look at this slide, in 2013, in the whole of Africa, we had 132 registered ASNs in the country. Whereas in the beginning of 2023, we had a total of 2,257. Now that is an amazing growth to see over Africa. And you can see in the 2023 image that South Africa has the most concentrated amounts of ASNs, active ASNs, followed by Nigeria and of course Kenya. So this is showing us that peering is really growing in Africa, right? Which is very exciting. In a recent analysis that I did, I found, I was looking at South Africa in terms of registered ASNs. So in November of 2022, we had a total of 547 ASNs that was active and which was active and registered in South Africa. When I had a look at the numbers again about a week ago, we are now sitting at around 850. So meaning in the last 6 months, or a bit more than that, let's say 8 months, in the last 8 months, we saw an increase of over 300 networks getting an ASN and wanting to become part of the peering environment in South Africa. So that is fantastic to see that it is still a growing market. And, you know, the peering knowledge is being shared, right? We have more networks wanting to become part of our peering community. So capacity growth in peering capacity growth. So reviewing the total growth globally, Africa has seen a significant growth over the years. So if we have a look at the tables that are presented here, so AF being Africa, you can see that the percentages actually look ridiculous in terms of the growth that has been happening in Africa. And that is fantastic. That means we are leading the pack. We are getting there. We are growing. So this is very exciting to see. And, you know, we are anticipating a faster growth within the next 5 years. So the average download speeds in sub-Saharan Africa was the highest in Rwanda, South Africa, and Madagascar in 2022, with around 52.1 megabits per second, 28.6 and 19.2. South Sudan has seen 10.9% internet penetration, with Somalia, who has 13.7 internet penetration. So South Sudan is the lowest in Africa. That the slide is a bit incorrect, but South Sudan is a bit slower in terms of Africa and internet growth within Africa. Despite the rising number of users, the internet penetration rate stood at 43% in 2021, which is below the average of 66%. So we are growing, but it is still you know, below average, and that is due to, you know, the unique challenges that we have here in Africa. As of 2022, the share of the total population of South Africa using the internet was nearly 80%. And we estimate by 2027 that 90% of South Africans will be on the internet, which is fantastic. That means there's more connectivity opportunities. There's more rural areas becoming, you know, connecting onto the internet. In 2021, roughly 13% of internet users worldwide was located in Africa, which is fantastic. So we want to grow that number. We want to get Africans connected. What are the challenges? So, I mean, we speak about this every year, right? It's unstable power supply. I mean, it's been a treat being in Ghana and there's no power outages, which I am accustomed to in South Africa. So it's been a treat being here. But this is the reality of Africa, right? We do have power challenges, and we are hoping to see sustainability become a bigger topic and a bigger concentration point within Africa. Political restrictions. So Ben just touched on, you know, the challenges that we have to connect countries. Higher layer 2 connectivity costs. So yes, it is still expensive to connect, but the prices are decreasing. So we are hoping to see the prices decrease very much, you know, in the next 5 years, which makes it more affordable for us to connect to each other. Poor infrastructure. So as Ben also mentioned, the challenges of poor infrastructure without the African continent, you know, collapsing infrastructure, you know, it's just not built the way Europe and the US is. So we do have that unique challenge, but we will overcome. We know how to make a plan in Africa. So yeah, I mean, that is just an overall of what is happening in Africa. It's good to know that we are getting there, we are growing, and we are seeing investment in Africa. So the only thing I can ask you to do is please cut the internet dinosaur some slack. He's doing his best to keep us connected. And that's it.
Oh, thank you so much, Yolandi. Do we have questions, comments? We've got a couple of minutes for. All right, she will be available on her stand, NAP Africa one. So if you have any further things to talk to you about, please do. Okay, just one more announcement. All these presentations from yesterday and today will be uploaded to the web, to the event page. So if you have missed any of it, you can always go back to it. So now, Frank, are you available? We're going to have the next session for peering personals.
Is Frank available? Okay, can you come please to the front, the ones who have submitted the slides for the peering personals, that is for KIXP, is it Milka? And then Trinet, Carl from Benin, and after him, Akamai, Lukasz, I think will present. And then ASPC 844, our friend Matthew, who was missing 2 times yesterday, will be the 4th one. KIXP, please come.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Milka Muga from Kenya. Welcome to the Kenya Internet Exchange Point. We are owned, built, and run by the community, and it is managed by Testbook, which is the technology service providers of Kenya. Kenya has around 17 million internet users. At the exchange, we have 126 members currently. We're pushing traffic of around 1.2 terabytes in our 4 POPs. That is ADC Nairobi, Ikolo Nairobi, and Mombasa, and Pikes. We have 6 peers on 100 G ports, majority is on 10 G ports. Our NOC team is available 24/7. That also includes the business development team. Our contacts are here, BizDev at Testbook or Milka at Testbook. So as always, thank you for this chance and welcome to the KIXP.
Thank you, KIXP. So I don't see somebody from Trinet here in front. Are you here, Lukasz? Come. So then we continue with Akamai. Or Ashlyn, can you show the slide quickly, the second one? But there's not much data on it, unfortunately. Yeah, let's continue.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lukasz from Akamai. And for those who are not familiar with Akamai, we are a provider of a cloud platform which delivers, accelerates, and secures content and applications over the internet. We are present at nearly 200 internet exchanges around the world. And in Africa, we can peer at 12 IXPs in 7 countries. And the total port capacity we have currently at those exchanges is 2.1 terabits per second. And our AS number is 20940. We have an open peering policy. All the details can be found in the peering DB. I'm here around if you would like to have a chat and learn more. Thank you.
Thank you, Lukasz. And then Matthew, please, next slide.
Hello again. My name is Matthew Chigwende from Liquid Intelligent Technologies. Liquid Intelligent Technologies operates a network in 14 African countries, covering all the way from Cape to Cairo and east to west as well. We are generally, our peering policy is generally open. The only thing is that we do not peer with our customers. You can contact us at peering@liquid.tech, and we are also on peering DB. We've got another slide showing the where we peer. How do I? Let's click forward. Okay, so we peer in, we are in Amsterdam, Marseille, London, and newly in Lisbon, and also in the USA and UAE. And in Africa, we are mainly on all the cities in South Africa. We're in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Nigeria, and Rwanda. And we keep growing as liquid increases more on the footprint. Thank you so much. And if you want to talk to any of us, we have a stand outside, and we are also free to meet. Our team from Nigeria, Ivory Coast are all here, so you can arrange meetings with us, and we are available.
Thank you, Matthew. And now I believe we will have another personal introduction. If anybody wants to submit, you can still try to do this again one more time, just before the lunch. But now, Matthew, you have an announcement.
Oh yeah. So now we're going to the tea break, and after this, there will be more. Okay. Yes, Martin, we still have your presentation before the next agenda on the item, which is which is going to be a panel. Okay. So guys, enjoy the tea break, and thank you so much for your listening and participation in this one. Thank you so much to you.
technologies are young people, and young people were asked if the mobile data plans were hard to afford. And here's a list of an indication of affordability. And I'd ask people to be aware that affordability is not the same as expensive. A thing doesn't have to be expensive to still be unaffordable. And in fact, that mistake is made where the World Economic Forum says sub-Saharan Africa has the world's most expensive mobile data prices, widening the digital divide between the world's haves and have-nots. But actually, it'd be more accurate to say least affordable, in as much as on the inverted pyramid, you'll see, if you can read the text, that actually North America has the most expensive data, but it's by far not the least affordable. The position there of sub-Saharan Africa in second line is clearly, for many people in sub-Saharan Africa, placing mobile data plans to consume appreciable amounts of internet services beyond reach financially. Equiano will help reduce international transport costs upstream of the national subsea gateways, but as Google said, it's a multifaceted problem that Google cannot solve alone. So first of all, now we're going to just delve into some of the challenges caused by a combination of availability, affordability, and cost or affordability problems around the world. Google has, in their paper, was talking about the entire value chain, or the submarine value chain. And in fact, in the blogs which we've written in the past, we've used exactly the same term. There are various points along the end-to-end value chain, from upstream content caches in country, hopefully, rather than remotely, to the last mile and middle mile connectivity costs, each of which becomes a point of cost inflection that can make not necessarily the service unaffordable, but make the quality of service appallingly bad, or resources on the internet unavailable. And many of these are addressable and can be corrected. So Google talks about the entire value chain, the submarine connectivity value chain, and we've been talking about the same. Inflated pricing at any point affects the entire end-to-end value chain adversely, ultimately decreasing end-user consumption. And here are some various points and stakeholders along the submarine connectivity value chain: cable landing stations, cross-border terrestrial fiber, data centers, internet exchanges, middle mile infrastructure, last mile mobile, broadband and fixed wireless access, end users and devices. We should never forget, cost of handsets may have come down, but the cost of mobile data plans on a monthly basis can still be beyond reach of many people. And finally, the most important, potentially within Africa itself, government, regulator and licensing authorities' position in stimulating competition and resiliency for internet services, which will impact the digital economy and the growth of eGDP. So let's look at infrastructure for a moment. Got my funky little logo here in the corner showing a piece of missing infrastructure, which obviously leaves people stranded and unable to connect to the internet. And here are some sound bites of various scenarios. This is, firstly, the White House itself has recently committed to $450 million worth of financing for Africa, particularly aimed at infrastructure projects, not at closing the digital divide by nurturing digital literacy and digital capabilities and digital skills, sorry, it's the word I was looking for, to create an open, interoperable, reliable and secure internet. So there's significant external investment in some of the infrastructure plans going on. Microsoft themselves investing 100 million in Africa to service plans to build out infrastructure in locations that are poorly served in Tanzania, Uganda particularly, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, Nigeria, to the unserved that we were maybe highlighting a little yesterday. When it comes to capacity, then we run into some interesting scenarios. This is one in Mexico. Telmex Mexico had an outage that afflicted 15 states across Mexico. Telmex actually attributed to that significant geographical outage to a single fiber optic cut. Tim, in Italy, these are countries where this is a country where perhaps you wouldn't expect this. Actually, Sparkle is a single upstream to the mobile opco, something that was at one time not permitted, but legislation was changed by the government, and the result was Sparkle became the sole upstream. Sparkle had an outage on their network, I think it was in Frankfurt, and as a result, a large chunk of TIM network found itself cut off from the public internet. T-Mobile decided to de-peer from AMS-IX. This was a couple of years ago, without taking due cognizance of whether their backbone capacity was able to accommodate the hairpinning that would thereby happen back to Frankfurt. The result was, as it was described in the media, T-Mobile had effectively done a no-deal Brexit on their subscribers. So the question here is, what was the cause for the insufficient capacity or lack of diversity and competitive alternatives for upstreams or for international connectivity? And is this a question of just an unfortunate one-off accident, or is there a kind of a bit of a trend here that has been going on, and that's certainly my view, inevitable consequence of commercial imperatives taking priority over and not aligning with end user or national interests, particularly government interests, to grow the digital economy. There's also the question of routing and peering policies. We all know that peering can sometimes happen not only out of country, but also out of region, and has been responsible for some significant hairpinning or tromboning of traffic out of regions such as, for instance, the Middle East, which continues to this day because of regulatory commercial environment, but also peering decisions that are made that subvert any intention to keep content and peering local in country. So here are some examples. i3DNet at the Middle East Peering Forum. Please peer across borders, make it easy and affordable to connect to an IXP in a neighboring country, i.e. please don't take me into Europe from Africa to actually pick up content that's available somewhere locally in region. Shahid, this was talking about the latency effects, which I think we should always be aware of. 20 milliseconds, you know, the physics of light in optical fiber, we know. You can calculate what the latency should be, ballpark figure. Instead of 20 milliseconds, it should have been, we were looking, this customer was looking at, service provider, I should say, was looking at 300 milliseconds. And again, you know, we did some analyses actually using the wonderful but now defunct Dyn tool that existed for Oracle that was originally Renesys. We were able to track AS path, and actually with some latency measurements attached, we could see that geographic proximity to end users, which is essential for CDNs, for gaming, and for AI applications and metaverse that Ben was talking about the other day. A straight AS path is essential. You can be as close as you like, but if your AS path is taking you, instead of just down the road, 34,000 kilometers around the Americas, which one of the AS paths that we analyzed from Sao Paulo to Peru, then the end user experience is predictably appalling or unusable. Affordability. The World Economic Forum says a combination of poor infrastructure and the control that telecom operators have over consumer rates are rated by one charity as among the leading causes of Africa's high data costs. Now, this isn't a unique situation. There are other parts of the globe, usually highly regulated markets, usually locations where there isn't cross-border arrangements, or where an SLT is maybe hosted in a incumbent operated cable landing station and data center that requires, that causes extreme metro and front haul costs to be applied to requirements for connectivity that actually destroy the business case for content being cached in region. And this is a diagram that I've built, which hopefully it was intended actually for a regulator elsewhere in the Middle East to explain the effect of costs at this particular inflection point. So we have on the right-hand side of the screen access into a carrier-neutral data center such as Equinix, and this is from experience, so please bear with me here. Subsea access from cable landing station, terrestrial cross-border fiber, and also access network, whether it's enterprise wireline, Ethernet services, or whatever from the enterprise campus or office, and also obviously the subscriber internet, broadband or mobile broadband connections. And at any of these points of inflection, excessive cost will kill the business case for growth, will prevent content caching locally, and will actually stifle or prevent entirely the growth of the digital economy. I'm sure many people will recognize these scenarios and experiences that they've had as service providers. I would welcome any conversations afterwards that anyone wants to have about this. The effects of these high pricing, these points of inflection, that have nothing to do with the capacity and low cost that potentially Equiano and 2Africa provides to the African continent, can subvert entirely the intended growth of the digital economy. And they affect in-country caching, peering, and of course, internet performance and end user experience, even if everything is affordable and otherwise available. So the effects are less local content caching, limited IX, either existence or a limited amount of peered traffic. Also a lack of private peering, which our experience is that 90% of, shall we say, the big fat pipes, the independent large peering sessions of private peering over physical cross connects inside co-location facilities, and the carrier neutral colo facility plus IX is kind of like the golden combination that really unlocks the real full benefits of peering and a peering ecosystem. Suboptimal routing remains a real genuine problem, and poor internet performance and availability and lower internet resilience caused by maybe a single upstream to downstream, which we've addressed here previously. The Internet Society has actually approached the same problem from another end, which we've been talking about, and that is their internet resilience measurement. Their attempt is to create a series of indices that explain the likelihood potentially for, predicts the likelihood of one of the scenarios that we've looked at previously today occurring. The resilience index reveals at a macro level the multiple influences on national internet adoption and digital economy growth that I've kind of just touched on today a little bit in this speech. So I'd recommend people take a look at that. And what I'm hoping is that the multiple influences that we review today are not news to everyone, that people have experience of these things that I'm talking about. And it gets to my final assertion. Africa's digital economies are on their own journey. That journey does not have to retrace the paths or revisit the mistakes that have been made and continue to be made elsewhere in the world. So I'm just about wrapping up now, and thank you for listening to me. The one thing that I'd like to do is, as we enter a discussion, hopefully, is ask the question, should there be a telecommunications and regulatory environments best practices playbook to inform all stakeholders, but particularly governments and regulators, in the connectivity value chain on the common attributes of a successful digital economy? Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Martin. Up next, got time for questions? Yeah, any questions? Awesome. Thanks, Martin. next, we'll have the IXP panel with the theme being collaboration between same market IXPs. Can I call up all the panelists up to the stage as well as the panel moderator, Dr. Angus Hay? You can all make your way up to stage, please. Thank you. Mr. Mohammed, IXPN, if you can make your way up to stage, please. He was here at the moment. Mr. Mohammed, are you here? IXPN team? I know Michelle is, she's out there, she'll bring him in now. Okay, let's begin. Okay, over to you. I have already. Okay, introducing the panel moderator. Oh, here we go. Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Mohammed. Okay, introducing the panel moderator, Dr. Angus Hay. Thank you.
Morning all. Everybody looks very tired today. I'm an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. Don't worry, I'm not going to quote the whole speech, but you can look it up. I'm sure you know where that comes from. Just a bit of background, because Taryn didn't mention it, but I work for Africa Data Centers. So I currently work for a carrier-neutral data center provider. But I've had a little bit to do with the internet over the last few years. I was part of the team that brought the internet to South Africa in about the early 90s, 1990, 1991. And I've been in and out of the internet community since. But in this context, I'm representing a data center, and therefore I think I can safely say I'm IXP neutral. Perhaps they put me in charge because South Africans are well known for making peace. I'm hoping that's not the case. But to be serious for a minute, the concept of IXP neutral, the concept of exchange neutral is not something that one heard in the past. It's something that seems to have appeared more recently. The idea that we have competing internet exchanges and that somehow from a data center perspective, we like everybody, we carry neutral, we like everybody in our data centers. But the idea that we are IXP neutral is perhaps a newer concept. So today's session is really going to look at how the dynamics between internet exchanges in the same market, entering the same markets, and potentially collaborating to drive the goal that we're all driving, which is the growth of the internet in the same markets. Back to last night, I think the thing that struck me most about last night is that Africans have energy. They have an insanely large amount of energy. For those who were at the party, by the way, so those who weren't, you missed something. But the Africans have a lot of energy, but sometimes I think we don't always direct that energy and coordinate that energy in the way that we should. And so part of what I'm going to appeal to the panel today is the focus today is on collaboration. It's not on conflict. It's whether we're competing or not. It's really around how do we drive the growth of the internet together. To quote Vint Cerf, the father of the internet, IP addresses do not have country codes. And for those who know the history, that was a conscious choice. It was a decision made in the original development of the internet protocol that it would not have country codes. You must remember at the time, this is in the 60s, telephone numbers had country codes and there were boundaries between countries. And the internet, in one fell swoop, destroyed those boundaries by creating a universal scheme that did not have inherent in it country codes. To be fair, we probably are moving back towards countries, but I think the lesson there is that the internet is really about what it says it is. It's a set of interconnected networks, and the role of IXPs is to get those networks to connect to each other. And perhaps the question that then arises is when we start looking at IXPs, immediately that you look at IXPs, suddenly you hear names that have country names, they have city names. And perhaps that's where the starting point is for conversation today. So the questions I'm going to pose are directed to all of the players here, but we're talking about players, some of whom are entering markets from other markets and perhaps need to understand the nuances of those markets they're moving into. Not every country is the same, not every continent is the same. But at the same time, established exchanges in a market also need to understand that because we have fewer borders, because there is more global competition, that competition is going to arrive in markets, and competition is almost always going to make us better. So that's perhaps a little bit of guidance for the panel as well to think about where we're going. I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, and I'm going to, let's start at this end. Last in, first out. The first panelist today that we have is Mr. Mohammed Radman, who is from IXPN in Nigeria. Mohammed.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mohammed Rodman from Internet Exchange Point of Nigeria, which is a membership-based, not-for-profit organization. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Right. My name is, sorry?
Yeah, go ahead, Nurani.
My name is Nurani Nimpuno. I'm from the London Internet Exchange, Links. We're a non-profit membership-based organization. And I'm also the vice chair of the EuroIX, which is the Association for IXPs in Europe and beyond.
My name is Obinna Adunike. I represent AfPIF. We are based in Lagos, and our facility is currently at Rack Center, Lagos. We are a new IX, and we are growing as much as possible to, I think we'll get to that point, but the goal is to get to a point where we're able to add more value to the community. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Wouter Ensing. I'm working with AMZIX, also a member-based internet exchange originated in Amsterdam, but has grown to several parts of the world.
Good morning. My name is Daniel Kofi Ansen-Kufu. I'm representing Ghana Internet Exchange. It's a flagship program of Ghana Internet Service Providers Association.
Okay. For the first question, let me see who should we direct the first question to? Who looks keen? Let's start with the host country. So to Daniel, in your opinion, what differences do you see amongst the various types of internet exchanges that we see in Africa?
Well, I basically think it's to do with the origin. So for example, Ghana Internet Exchange was set up by Ghana Internet Service Providers Association. So from the onset, you typically find the carriers and the telecom institutions joining. But then we are opening up. Now, if you go to other exchanges, which are set up by data centers, you have a lot of mix of, background, not only telecoms, but you have the financial institutions, you have other organizations also joining. So basically, I think it's the origin of the founders of the exchange that actually structures the exchange.
Okay. Ubina, do you want to take the other side of that question?
Yeah, so I agree with Daniel, but the key point he mentioned is the fact that there is that evolution that's happening. Originally, it used to be the telcos, the MNOs, ISPs, the network operators, but right now, the internet, it's by itself, by its nature, is growing. You could see enterprise businesses owning ASNs. You could see a lot of people trying to take control of how their traffic is routed and so on and so forth. So that is also addressing the need for that routing not to just be controlled by that association anymore. Not that it's bad, but if there is a value chain that needs to be grown, if there is value that needs to be added, so that costs new kinds of services to now come into the IX space. So you could see different kinds of ISs, not primarily as it used to be, coming up to do new things in the community.
Okay. Ronnie, just to let me repeat the question again. Just where do you see the differences, or do you see differences between the different kinds of exchanges that we see in the African market?
I think in essence, an IXP is an IXP. An IXP means that you enable local interconnection. That's, I think, what sits at the core of most IXPs. But across Africa, but also actually globally, we see that there's a great variety in both the models that you use in terms of, are you a commercial IXP or a non-profit? Are you for free? Are you a membership-based organization? I know in the past, there were a lot of discussions around that. What is the best model? But I think, personally, if you serve your customers well, then you're doing well as an IXP. Then exactly what model you have, that is up to you and the people you serve. But then when it comes to the technical side of things, I think there's also some variety. Again, I think local switching sits at the core of what an IXP does. I think in Europe, a lot of the exchanges are looking at a lot of value-added services. We've seen a shift in our membership. We see a lot of new enterprise, fintech, banks, non-traditional networks who have very different needs and also very different understanding of what peering is. So we develop services to cater to their needs. We will never abandon peering and local interconnection. That's what we always do. But we see that in Africa as well. There's an increased need for cloud. We see some of the IXPs have marketplace. Some of the IXPs have other value-added services. So I think as the future develops, I think you'll see even more variety of that.
Right. Mohammed, do you see a similar kind of trend in Nigeria in terms of demand for services, or do you see it more focused on the basics of localizing traffic and peering? Where is the focus that you see in Nigeria?
Okay, because some of the exchanges are relatively new, to be honest with you, up to now, you cannot really say their focus areas. But if you look at how it was set up and the origin, to some extent, yes, that can actually guide. For some of them, of course, everyone is trying to set up an exchange point towards domestication of traffic. And when you see data centers having internet exchange points, of course, they want all the various networks to meet in their data center, which eventually adds value to the data center by bringing in hosting companies and all that. So it's I can't really say it's relatively something of recent maybe it will take time for us to see their areas of focus. Yes, thank you.
Walter, I'm going to twist the question a little bit because I think we've kind of heard the differences. I mean, we don't have every possible kind of exchange represented here. There's certainly, internet exchanges that are in specific data centers. They are free versus commercial. There are multiple models, but I think just to explore the variety a bit, maybe just to get a little bit of understanding of AMSIX's involvement on the African continent.
Thank you, Agnes. As I said, we originated in Amsterdam about 30 years ago, and throughout, especially the recent years, we've had a lot of conversation with local parties, whether that be telecom operators or data center companies, with the question, can you help us build an internet exchange? And there's various models there, from fully white label to fully, well, in our case, AMSIX brand. And this is also how we got to Africa when Equinix acquired Main One, where there was an internet exchange, the WEFIX. We were approached in our partnership with Equinix to see if we could take over the management and the operation of the internet exchange in Lagos. With the goal, but I'll have Martin confirm that, to safeguard the neutrality and the independence of that internet exchange. So that's how we got to Lagos. We have an operation in Egypt. Telecom Egypt approached us. Can you build and run an internet exchange for us? Yes, we can. And we literally do it for them. So we deliver it as a service. So it says powered by AMSIX, but it is the Egypt IX. Similarly, we were in conversations with Wingu, a data center company, operating an internet exchange because it helped. And we were in conversation saying, it's not our primary focus. Can we work together to build out that ecosystem? Not so much just for the country, but because it's a relatively small country, but with the potential to serve all kinds of neighboring markets. So that's how we got here.
Good. I'm going to come back to Bina. So, I mean, we've spoken about, the different stages of development of internet exchanges, and some exchanges are newer, some are more advanced. For me. How, in your exchange, how do you measure success? What is your measure of your impact? Is it based on the number of peers? Is it on traffic volumes? What are you measuring to say we've succeeded?
Okay, to understand that, you would also need to look at how we define the values we add to our members and to people who connect to our exchange. When we started off, what we thought about it was to look at the Nigerian environment and look at, okay, who are the people who are already there in terms of the network providers? That's one category. The other categories are the enterprise businesses who actually we've had conversations with that say, hey, look, how can we take charge of where our traffic come from and where they go to and what happens in between that part, right? Okay, then we also have some other people, especially very young service providers who probably just got a license or are about to get a license, but they don't know what to go next. They don't have that technical capability to go to the next level. So how can we also add value to these people? So this and a couple of other metrics are things that we thought about and said, okay, fine. Can we use this platform to address these challenges, right? So to us, success, it's including the usual members, traffic and all that, yeah. But most importantly, how many young networks are we able to help to grow? Right now I have about 4 that we've helped secure their ASNs in the past couple of months. We've had some that will help go through the regulatory process of getting licenses and all that. These are all measures of success that we are happy and we are actually driving through. We also have those of them that have been operating for a while now. They don't have ASNs, but they've been there buying capacity, reselling and all that stuff. They don't have the technical capability to know where to go next. It's like every other business. You buy for 1 cent and you sell for 2 cents, and then whatever is the difference is your profit. But can you do more? Can you do better traffic engineering? Can you put more technical capabilities? You can't take away the fact that, especially in Nigeria, the brain drain, what we call the Japa syndrome, everybody is running to Canada and Australia and all that. So I'm not going to, our engineers can work everywhere. So if we have a central platform where people come together to, have those value additions, gain those value additions, use our platforms to achieve all the resources, well, that's all measures of success. So it's not just about membership and traffic.
Okay, so a lot more of what you're doing is focused on the community itself and the development of the community rather than simply being the platform.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Nurani, you were talking about services. I'm interested to hear, what are Links's measures on the same scale?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a simple answer for you either, because we don't see one single measure, right? Obviously, we look at the number of peers. If all of a sudden we see that we're losing a lot of peers, then that's a bad sign. Obviously, we look at traffic, but because we provide other services as well, we might not be growing in numbers or traffic, but we might actually be growing in the uptake of other services that we have. Obviously, we look at revenue. My boss always says, Nurani, we don't have to make money, but you can't be losing money. So obviously, we need to be financially stable. But at the end of the day, for us, we do this annual member survey that we take very, very seriously. And that's something that gets collated and we discuss in each department on senior management level. And we have internal measures there that we want to reach certain levels of quality when delivering services to our customers. So it's a combination of those things, but our membership survey is probably the most insightful one in are we meeting the needs of our customers? So yeah, a mix of those things.
Okay. Kofi, just to come back to a slightly different question, but I think it's relevant particularly to this measure of success is, do you know how much traffic in Ghana is peered locally versus how much is tromboned elsewhere? Do you have that measure at all?
We do have that, and we are looking at it from 3 angles. So you can talk about the members. You can also talk about the traffic that is being kept locally. Now, Ghana, for instance, we have 2 major carriers, Vodafone and MTN. You then also have the subsea marine cable operators like Main One, Dolphin, who are also generating a lot of traffic. So it's a mix of both. You can't always say the membership. I mean, you can have a lot of members, maybe 1,000, but if the traffic exchange is very low, then we still have an issue. So we are actually looking at the point whereby most of the traffic which is bound to Ghana will stay in country. That is our main focus for measuring success over here. And I think we are getting there.
Yeah, I mean, and what are you actively doing, technically and in terms of the community? What are you actively doing to make that happen?
So within the past year, we've actually extended our fabric from 2 data centers to 4 now. So back then it used to be at the National Information Technology Agency. That's the government data center. Then it expanded to RAC Africa, PAX. But now it's available in Onyx and Equinix. So the next stage we'll be looking at is the geographical aspects. When you take, for example, Kumasi, which is the 2nd biggest city from Accra, we need to extend our tentacles also over there. So our main thing that we are actually measuring is interconnectivity between the major carriers, because they carry a lot of traffic. What you find is, for example, you have the banks, which actually subscribe to the carriers. And eventually they will go through their careers at the exchange. So it's a kind of issue, especially looking at the foundation of gigs. It was set up by the internet service providers. So, hey, getting a bank to come on board an exchange, which is my customer, you have some, how do you call it, loyalties over here that comes into play. And come on, are you taking my customer away from me if it comes to the exchange? So these are some of the things that we also need to iron out.
Wouter, when you're essentially, I suppose, a brand but operating separately in markets, when you're doing that, are you following a similar playbook that you're trying to localize into the market that you've deployed in? Trying to understand if there's any different dynamic there.
There are a lot of dynamics coming into play. Back then, we didn't. Yeah. I wouldn't say competition, but we used to be the only internet exchange.
Okay.
Now,
yeah.
I think the ultimate goal, I guess, the ultimate reason for internet exchanges is to keep traffic local, and throughout the different phases of development or stages of development of a country, that could be on a regional level, that could be on a local level, that could even be on a city level, and even within cities, talking edge deployments. I guess we're not there yet when it comes to the majority of markets in Africa. So there's an interesting dynamic, and this has got nothing to do with AMZIX specifically, that the more peers you would get in a network, the more value that ecosystem has. Yep. So you could kind of look at it, if we can expand it and get more people in that bubble, the more value it has. But at the same time, if that bubble grows bigger, there is the geography. You will need to travel the distance. So at the end of the day, it's kind of counterproductive to have a huge bubble. So you will get smaller bubbles. And I think when we look at least West Africa, if we look at it as a region, not all the traffic, unfortunately, we're not in that phase yet. Not all the content is available in each and every country, although that should be the kind of end state. But it's going to take, for some countries, another 5, 10, 15 years, I don't know. So if we can, collaborate on that to make that content available and more.
So let me take a little bit further, because I think you're also in a unique position in the region to some extent. And just to understand, there's been lots of debates around country versus region, internet exchanges as well. And I'm very interested to hear what your thoughts are on West African regional exchange of traffic rather than per country, and whether that's something that's part of what you're driving or not.
We do have a strong view on it, and it's our view, and we're here also to test it and to have the conversations with other internet exchanges, and Daniel besides me. In the phases, not all the content is going to be everywhere at the same time, so that will be a phase thing. So if we can cooperate between those internet exchanges, and Gigs is kind of next door in Nigeria, Togo, Benin, and all the way around. If we can make that content available to other local markets until such time that content is local, it's not ideal, but it's a good interim step. Now, there's multiple ways to do that. It will take some backhauling. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But if we can do that by kind of redistributing, so Gigs, for example, using the content that we may have and they don't have yet, take it to Ghana and redistribute it there so that the local community can stay local and can grow instead of us in this case and building internet exchanges in every single country. So yeah, keeping that local and working with those local parties, and we've had the conversation with the majority of internet exchanges in the neighboring countries, but also locally. I have a meeting scheduled with Mohammed let's have the conversation. It may not work, I don't know, but let's have a conversation.
Right. So that brings me to now we're going to get to the difficult questions. So Mohammed, first to you. In the interest of time, I'm going to pull some questions together. So, in your opinion, what opportunities exist for collaboration between exchanges? And perhaps the flip side of that, what are the challenges to collaboration? And perhaps maybe the obvious question is, do you want to collaborate? So, do you see collaboration happening? What's going to make it possible, and where are the barriers? No easy questions.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. First, yes, you see, based on the initial discussions, the different model of the exchange points. Some are commercial, some are community-driven, some are managed by government agencies. Yes, it's difficult to collaborate when you have different operational model. You don't share the same goals, the same vision. For a community-driven exchange point, sometimes, as they answered earlier, which one is the determining success factor? Is it traffic? Is it peers? To me, because I'm community-driven, I will add an additional layer. I will call it a 3-dimensional model. You have to have the membership, you have to have the peers, as well as other value-added services you provide to the community when it comes to training, capacity building, hosting of critical internet resources like we host root servers and so many other things. So yes, it's possible to collaborate as long as you have a shared vision, shared value. What will be the challenges towards success? I think you asked that questions, right? One is that if you don't share values, it's going to be difficult to collaborate. The second one is, I'm thinking of really the challenges, because for us to identify how we can challenge, we have to have what are the areas that we have collective risk or collective collaboration. So if the exchanges in an ecosystem have a shared collective risk, they can come together and they can, collaborate. If, for example, in some regulatory areas in Nigeria, for example, we had 2 governments in different periods where they mandated all ISPs, for example, to connect to an exchange point because they don't know what is an exchange point. They don't know that ISPs are in different tiers. They expect everyone to exchange traffic. Some have open policies, some have closed policies, and therefore they will not do that. So in such areas of risk, I think exchange points can collaborate. But if such risks are not there, I don't think collaboration will happen, and therefore each one will tend to operate in their parallel markets. Okay. Yes.
Nirani, I'm not going to let you take exactly the same question, because we've heard some of the challenges. I'm much more interested to hear from your perspective, because you're coming from elsewhere into particular countries. Do you see challenges outside of the IXP community and the internet community? I mean, Mohammed mentioned regulation, governments. In a broader sense, what challenges do you see to coming into a market?
It's a very good question, and I'm actually going to link it back to the corporation part. Yeah, that's fine. Because, and I'll just preface it by saying, because I've been involved with IXPs in Europe for so long and involved in the EURIX, I think this association that we started up, I think not only did it spur the development of new IXPs in Europe, it also really solidified the cooperation between IXPs in Europe. So I know this idea of cooperation between IXPs might be a little bit new in Africa, but in Europe, we've been doing it for 20 years. And it's not always comfortable. And sometimes some IXPs cooperate a lot more because they have certain shared interests, or sometimes it's personalities, sometimes it's that they have certain technical challenges, sometimes because they have the same regulatory challenges. And I actually think Europe wouldn't be as IXP rich as it is if we didn't have this EUR-IX. So coming back to your question about coming into a new market, what I see is that there are, I think it's amazing to see the development. I've been coming to AfPIF since the very first AfPIF many years ago. And you can see that, 10 years ago, there were not many carrier neutral data centers. There were some submarine cables, but they were still lacking of that. There were challenges in terms of IXPs and in terms of terrestrial fiber. Now we see the presence and the also future investments of carrier neutral data centers in markets. I think that's amazing to see. That's one of the corner pieces in a country. We see the submarine cable developments. That's also fantastic. For us, we can see that the regulatory environment is still a challenge in many countries, not just for IXPs to get the right permits and licenses, but also for ISPs to get the right permits and licenses. It's sometimes very, very costly and sometimes incredibly cumbersome. Even getting internet resources is challenging for some, just in terms of resources they have. And we see that there's a challenge also in terms of terrestrial fiber. But we think that as an IXP, you can't fix all of those pieces. You can fix one part and you can work with all the local partners to try to develop the other things. We try to do work with educating regulators and governments of why an IXP is good to have in a country, that an IXP and many independent networks can actually strengthen the resilience of that country, that it can bring down the cost of connectivity in the country, that an IXP actually increases to the collaboration between networks. So it comes back to that collaboration. For me, you might have the same discussion. Why should this network and that one network collaborate? They're competitors, right? But they share a common interest in interconnecting an IXP. And I think from my perspective, I have learned so incredibly much from my IXP competitors, if you want, over the years, in terms of how they deal with regulatory issues, in terms of how they deal with marketing their IXP. Actually, AM6, one of Wouter's ex-colleagues who was a very senior person at AM6, she gave this amazing talk of how they grew AM6. When I just joined an IXP and I learned a lot from that. We share technical knowledge between the IXPs, because we don't think that that it's good to work in silos. And in some ways, it's easy to compare IXPs. Say they've got 435 AS numbers and they've got 500. But in many ways, we think that we are an alternative we provide interconnection options. It's not IXP A versus IXP B. It's maybe IXP A in combination with this transit provider, in combination with PNI, and maybe also in combination with this other IXP. Because we see in Europe, a lot of the large CDNs, when they come into a new market, they have as a policy to connect to two IXPs if there are, because it gives them resilience. So to me, it's tied together. The challenges we have in the market, we will have the same challenges because it affects our members and our customers. So if we can collaborate to educate regulators, educate networks in how to peer and interconnect, then that's actually good for everyone. It's about growing that ecosystem.
Thank you. Coffee. Okay. I'm going to ask another difficult question, because I can ask you the same question, but it's all the same answers. Do you think that you can have too many exchanges in a market? Yeah. Do you think you can have too many IXPs in one market?
Definitely, why not? I mean, the competition is good to grow the ecosystem, but what we also need to look at will be the policy and structure. Policy in the sense that, for example, if I have two exchanges in the same market and you have members, probably, let's say it's in Ghana, and you have a member peering from Amsterdam, then that's where we have to start looking at policy so that, latency. The main goal of having exchanges is to have good connectivity within a particular area. So it's like biting ourselves back when we start to introduce things like remote peering. I, for example, fall short of that. Then we also have to look at structure. Looking at IXP in Nigeria and Ghana Internet Exchange, is it possible where we can have some superstructure now whereby IXPs are interconnecting? That is also good. So we should have more than one IXP in the market, but definitely we should be looking at the policy and structure as to how they will operate.
Okay. Gabina, then just, we're going to get on to questions from the audience, but perhaps one last, just to tie the discussion around regulation and competition. What do you think regulators and policymakers should be doing to encourage IXPs and perhaps to encourage multiple IXPs in the market? And should regulators be in the business of controlling the IXPs in the market or encouraging competition between IXPs? What is the role of regulators in a market?
Okay, so should regulators control? I don't think control is the word, actually, really.
Yes, I know, but definition of control.
Yeah. Yes. So, right. So, there should be regulation, but the nature of that regulation is because, especially here in Africa, when you bring in regulators into a liberal market or a liberal environment or internet community, originally it sounds good, but over time things begin to shake. So I think that over time, this is going to play itself out. So, and regulators should just provide the enabling playground for collaboration between the exchanges. Individual exchanges should be able to come together on the round table and say, okay, fine, this is what we want to achieve. As long as there is no negative impact on the total internet structure or framework of that particular country and all that kind of stuff, there is no issue. So what regulators should focus on is making sure that the ethics of the is adhered to. There are those basic business moralities that come into those transactions and things like that, and making sure that everyone play within the guidelines, but trying to compel or control or insist that certain things has to be in certain ways. You have to. I don't think that should.
That's fine. I'm just open up to the panel. Does anybody have any final comments? I see Mohammed wanted to comment. Just final comments on this topic.
So yes. I actually wanted.
Okay. No, finish. Please go ahead.
I actually wanted to make a comment on the collaboration.
No, please go ahead.
Collaboration thing. For us, collaboration should, and I believe it already started. It's just that it's going to take some time to materialize into a more visible conversation. For example, when people come to me that they want to connect to our exchange, the first question is, what is your goal? That's what I usually do. What is your goal? So when I look at what you're trying to achieve and it makes sense that, look, IXPN is where you should be, I will send you to IXPN. Right? So I think he already started and we've already said doing that. In fact, Happy Mohammed is here, so he can also confirm that. So you go there and because the immediate value you are looking for is there. So I wouldn't use because I'm trying to grow an internet exchange point and get into a place where the value you're looking for is not there at that moment. So then you're talking about, we now look at things like redundancy. So we already have networks that come to us and say, look, we need redundancy. We want to be, be in a situation where we could, have that, and that. So those collaborations are already coming about. But when you talk about collaboration, people are looking at where there is already, a cable going from port A of IXA and go to the next cable of port B of IXB, which is not impossible. But again, I think the collaboration already started in Nigeria.
Okay, Mohammed. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, it's sorry. To be honest with you, one of the key challenges to collaboration, based on what some of the panelists mentioned here, is trust. You see, the European IXP Association is a collaboration between various IXPs, and they're really making progress because they are among peers, they are colleagues. Most of the exchanges in Europe started 20, 30 years ago, as they have said. Relatively, in fact, there are some countries in Africa that are establishing an exchange point maybe this year, right? They are relatively new. To me, when I see London Internet Exchange and I see Euro Amsterdam, I see them as our elders, the big boys up there when it comes to resources, technical skills, technology, funds. They are way ahead of us. So when they are coming into our small market, when you look at the total autonomous system numbers in Africa, Yolande showed it here, 2,500, 2,600 autonomous system numbers. UK alone has 2,300. In Nigeria, we have 260 autonomous system numbers, which is extremely small. Out of that 260, maybe only 50% of that are actually active, that are appearing. When I see a big exchange point that has so much arsenal when it comes to resources behind them, leaving a market of such huge market to come into my own smaller market that I'm trying to add value, and they're trying to say, hey, we can compete, we are colleagues. No, I'm sorry to say, it's a lion and a gazelle to collaborate against a hunter, a traditional hunter. So that is the reality. I'm scared, one, because for some of them, they are already offering, not only in Nigeria, across board, offering free ports, free cross connectivity. Why? To them, it's a value adds to the data center. While for IXP, and without those port charges, I will go out of business. And my revenues come from what I charge from members. And as you know, in African economy, the value of the currency is constantly being eroded. In Nigeria, in the last 3 months, 4 months, Naira has lost 50% of its value. And we are purchasing this equipment in US dollars, all the switches and the devices. How do they expect us to compete with free ports? Right? So it's good we engage, and to be honest with you, some of the people that have those exchanges are my friends, are my colleagues, but we need to have an open discussions regarding this issue to make sure that they don't strangle us out of business, where after some few years down the line, when the community-driven IXs are closed, those people will not start implementing port charges. We have seen it in different business areas where the big boys strangle the smaller ones. I'm sorry, I'm just saying my mind here.
Thank you.
Forgive me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to give one more opportunity. So before we move to questions, I don't know whether I should just direct this directly back to Nurani. It sounds a bit challenging, or if anybody else wants to comment, just directly to respond to Mohammed's challenge.
Hello?
Yep.
Yes. I hear what you're saying, and I completely understand what you're saying, actually. And I also understand you've been running an IXP for a long time, and then there are new players coming in with lots of resources. I think we are there to serve customers, serve a community. If you serve those customers well, you will continue to grow. If you do not serve them well, you will not. So, for example, many years ago, I worked for a Swedish exchange. And in the very, very early days of that exchange, we were running this was before I joined, old technology. And the members were not happy but the exchange didn't change. So some of them said, okay, we're going to start our own exchange. We're going to do it the way we think it should be done. And they did. And the exchange that I worked for went, whoops, okay, hang on, what are we doing now? We're not comfortable with this. Why are you joining this exchange? Well, because they're serving our needs. And it made the exchange that I worked for get its act together and change the technology to serve its members. It understood that it needed to serve the members and the needs of that community. At the end of the day, I think what is best for a market is it best for a market that there is one content provider, that there's one transit provider, is that there's one IXP. If that IXP does a great job, it shouldn't be worried about anything. If it doesn't do a great job, then maybe someone else will pop up. It will just be a matter of time. It has happened all over Europe. And I think if we do a bad job, I am pretty sure that people will tell us. And I'm pretty sure that they will not connect to our IXP. And I think in some ways, I do, I was joking actually with Salam from Netflix saying, why are you coming to Africa? There's local content. Why should an American company come and provide local content from other places? You could say the same about some of the other content providers, some of the transit providers. Why should there be why should there be others coming here? To me, it's about building infrastructure. If we can contribute with that, and if we speak to people on the ground who say, we want you to come, why should we not try to serve that need? And I understand that, and I think it's also this thing you talked about in EUR-IX. We've been IXPs for a very long time. It also means that we've been forced to work together. And it doesn't mean we cooperate all the time with everyone. There are some that I don't get along with particularly well, and we work more with some than others. There are some that have a lot of resources and some who don't. But to me, at the end of the day, if those customers can be served well, then that's what's good for that internet community. We play one little role in that. IXPs are a tiny part of that, but if we do it well, we can contribute. If we do it badly, maybe the existing IXP, or maybe another, or a third or a fourth IXP will come in. So it's not about us. For me, it's not about our IXP versus other IXPs. It's about what interconnection options can you offer that market. And if you do it well, it will take off.
Okay. I'm going to just go across the panel quickly because we want to go to questions. So starting right at the other end, just very quickly, any closing comments, any final responses? Kofi?
What I just want to add on is we, the local IXPs, the incumbent IXPs, we can't play defensive forever. There'll be a time we will have to have that conversation. So why don't we have it now? Mm-hmm. Now, the most important thing is let's identify what are some of the challenges that we are facing. I personally think one thing that we all should be focusing is content, generating our own local content, which is very important. What I see is reinvention of the wheel all the time. Hey, you're setting up an IXP, going to beg some content providers to come and sit in our country. It shouldn't be that. We should start to generate our content over here. And that is the main focus we should be looking at now. That's it. So for example, growing or nurturing companies to start up, our local owned versions of Amazons with the help of Amazon helping, not pushing them out, having videos being hosted in our country, nurturing these fintechs and all of these people to come on board the IXPs. So we should look at growing the content over here and not to fight the competition. We should have the conversation now. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand. I understand Mohammed's point, and it is true. There is probably a lot more resource in terms of people and possibly funding in some of the international IXPs. I haven't looked at these numbers, so we may well have a lot more resources available. Now the question to me is not so much whether that's true or not. It's about what we're going to do with it, and will we use the resources, both in people and in knowledge and in funding. Will we use it or will we abuse it? I think that's where we can make a difference.
Okay. I think that Mohammed's points are very valid. But I think, okay, from where I sit, some of you would have known that before now, I used to sit within the core rack center business operations before I took over this project. So I also know that some of those values or elephant free resources Mohammed mentioned that we may have access to, he also have access to them, because I know that at the rack center, anybody that connects to IXP and gets free cross connection, rack center actually pay for a couple of the transports that connect IXP to a couple of other data centers as well. So, and I know that everyone is putting their hands on both deck to make sure that the work that Mohammed and team has done for the past 10, 15, 20 years now, it continues to grow. As long as that value that an IX brings into the community remains stagnant. And that's what everybody is trying to do. How do we grow the community? Nobody is here to kill anybody. Nobody is here to push that person out of the market. It's all about how do we get going and make sure that what has started in Africa, what has started in Nigeria continues to grow. It doesn't go the other way around.
All right. Last comment? 1 minute, half a minute.
I feel like I've spoken enough.
Yeah.
I think I just want to say I quite liked in some ways Vauta's comment about it's about to me the proof is in the pudding. That's really what it's about. The proof is in the pudding. What do we, I think you will see, let's see in a few years' time, if who has the trust of the customers, if it has grown the entire ecosystem or if it's fragmented it. My hope is that where we go, we grow that ecosystem. If we can collaborate on capacity building, on education, on liaising with governments, then I think that is good for the country and the entire ecosystem. If we can grow that by having 1 or 2 or 3 IXPs that do outreach, education, that connect and teach about peering, BGP, routing, then for me, we have done an amazing job, and that's what my aim is.
Okay. Mohammed? Yeah.
My last word will be just to plead with the data centers that are hosting the different exchange points. Most of them, of course, call themselves carrier neutral data centers. I will plead that they treat whatever exchanges are within their facility exactly the same way without any preferential treatment. That is what I will plead, because exchange points do not have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 categorization. They are just simply a single switch can serve as an exchange point. There is no complexity whatsoever in establishing an exchange point. So please treat them equally. Thank you.
Okay. Just looking to the organizers, is there time for any question? None at all. I have 1 hand, 2 hands. Can we take 1 question, 2 questions? 10 minutes. Yeah, close. Okay, right. Well, do we have microphones? Okay. I'm going to go to the back first. Do we have microphones? There we go. Right. William. Mike? Stop. We have no sound. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. My name's William Stuckey. I'm a past ISP, I'm a past regulator, I'm an old man of the internet in Africa, and I'm currently an independent consultant. I don't have a question. I have two comments to make. The one is that unless you are one of the 16 tier 1 transit providers, there is never a reason for having a restricted peering policy. As Mohammed said, we learned from our elders in Europe, there's a reason that Links has mandatory multilateral peering. And I can prove that in almost all circumstances, it's in your economic benefits to peer with everyone, large or small. The second point is about foreign providers at your internet exchange point. You have won, you have arrived when you are no longer paying transit to get to YouTube, when you're no longer paying transit to get to Amazon and everyone else, when YouTube has a cache at your peering point, when Amazon Web Services is there, when Akamai is there, when Cloudflare is there, that's when you've arrived. And that's when you can count your IXP as success because it's saving you money because they are paying the costs for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Fiona.
Mine is also a comment. Just an observation. It's very difficult to say that an exchange point is coming into a space and they are willing to collaborate when they are not talking to the local exchange. There's been no meetings, no engagement, no requests for engagement. Requests for engagements get denied, but then you want there to be collaboration. That doesn't happen serendipitously or in osmosis or thin air. There has to be communication. When that happens, then we begin the journey of collaboration. Then we begin to see what value adds up. Mohammed mentioned that there could be expertise and ways of doing things different that are happening in Europe. We cannot know them unless you come and you say, this is now what is happening. This is the trend in which to move. Our members may not know them. Saying that the local community has called and the local communities at the same time saying, no, 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 no. It's putting people at loggerheads in an ecosystem that is not necessary, that doesn't add any value to any of the exchanges. It brings a lot of conflict. And in our situation in Kenya, it has now raised so many red flags with different ministries and different levels that there are new regulations being set up to be able to just manage the ecosystem. We had a level of openness that was working well, that was working for everybody. We now have about 20 new regulations that have come up that are going to apply to exchange points, service providers, and data center operators. So that is the result of the value add. Well, then, good. We're moving to the next level with our governments. Thank you.
Right, last one. Ben, is there also a comment? Or was it actually a question?
Mine is a question, I think. A friend of mine, a guy called Jim Forster, and I don't know if he's in the room, but he is here at AfPIF. Some years ago, he told me he used to work with John Chambers, the founder of Cisco. And John Chambers said that the recipe for a good partnership was number one, a shared vision. Number two, you get on with the people. And number three, some quick wins. So when it comes to this, we've been talking about partnerships and possibilities to partnership. I think the number 1 and 2 boxes are probably ticked, but are there any quick wins to be had of partnering with, in this sort of space?
Okay. Does anybody want to take that question? Because we are going to finish. Are there any quick wins to be had from collaboration between IXPs? Mohammed. So.
Okay, it's on collaboration towards capacity building. With a lot of migration of technical skills from Africa into Europe and the rest of the world, I think it's important now that the big players are here with the right arsenal. I think we can take that challenge head on when it comes to building skills and capacity, technical skills. Thank you.
Right. Now we are going to close. Thank you to all of the panel members. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for making this an interesting, lively debate. I was going to close with another quote along the lines of "Today it feels good to be an African," but I think probably may we live in interesting times is a more appropriate quote. I think we're at a very interesting point within the larger African internet ecosystem. We have a lot changing across the continent, and I think we're now starting to see the changes also not just in the carrier, the ISP, and the connectivity markets, but now also starting to see those changes in other markets, data centers, and particularly now the IXP market. Thank you, everybody, and it's been a great panel. Thank you.
We're just going to give speakers from yesterday and today their gifts, just starting with today's panelists. So just a big thank you from... Please stay on stage. Please stay on stage. We're going to give you your gifts. Thank you, gifts. Thanks. Can the speakers from yesterday also come up on stage, please, from the panels to collect their gifts? Thank you. Speakers from yesterday, please come up, and today. Yeah. Speakers, panelists from yesterday and today's session, you want to come up on stage and collect your gifts, please? Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, okay. Any other speakers? Ben? Is Ben here? Ben Roberts? Okay, thanks, man. Yeah, would you appear in personnel as well? Frank? Frank, can we have you up on stage, please? Thanks, Frank.
Okay, hello everyone again, last time now, and I would like to request to come in front Frank from PFIX, and from Unitel, the representative, and from CASAX, Morocco. Please come in front. PFIX first, if possible, please. The slide is being prepared. Who's PFIX, please? Frank.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Frank Kemde du Burkina Faso. Nous sommes le BFIX, le point d'échange Internet du Burkina Faso. Nous sommes situés à Ouagadougou et à Bobo-Dioulasso. Notre ASN, c'est le 3290 et nous sommes ouverts, nous faisons du pairing ouvert et sélectif selon votre besoin. Nous avons 14 membres et notre capacité de transit est de 50 gigabytes. Et pour les plus amples informations, vous pouvez vous voir sur notre page, que ce soit sur le Pairing DB et aussi au niveau de notre page Internet. Merci.
Thank you, Frank. And now for Unitel, please come on stage.
Good morning, everyone. Okay. We are Unitel. We are a leading mobile operator and service provider in Angola. We use a selective peering policies. We are present in some countries. We are in South Africa. We are in Portugal. We are in London, UK, as well as United States. We have a selective peering policy, as I mentioned. We are hoping to peering with the partners at Angola Internet Exchange, Angonix, at Links, DKPix, Lisbon, Equinix, ADA at Lisbon and Miami, as well as Napa Africa, Cape Town, and Johannesburg. Everyone who you want to peer in with us can send an email to peering@unitel.co.au. Our details are also available in PeeringDB, and we are also compliance with the manners recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, last not least, please welcome for CasaX.
Hello, everyone. This is the Casablanca Internet Exchange from Morocco. We're small, but growing over time. I understand we're across the great African Sahara from most people, so it's not easy to connect with us. But if anyone is interested in collaborations or in connecting, we are here. We are also the ports are free for as long as possible. We are hosted with N+1 data centers, which is contribution-free hosting if you're a content provider. So we'll be here. Just feel free to approach us and have a chat. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, and that's all for the peering personals. Now back to Karen. Thanks.
Thanks, Frank. Just a quick message before we all head to lunch. We would love to hear your feedback about the edition of AfPIF. We will put a QR code on the screen. Please scan it and give us your feedback or join the direct link. It is just 4 simple questions. This really does make things easier, and it will take you just less than 3 minutes. You can choose the language of the survey, English or French, inside the link. As part of the closing ceremony today, we'll announce the host and location for 2024. Please join us if you are already excited for the next edition. We are ready to go for lunch. Please collect your lunch ticket for today with our team right outside the conference room. Please make sure you are back in the room at 2 p.m. Thanks.